The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.
We, the heads of the EBRD, EIB, CEB, IMF and WBG met yesterday to discuss impacts on the global economy of the ongoing war in Ukraine and our respective and collective response to this crisis. We are horrified and deeply concerned about the Russian invasion of Ukraine and the ensuing crisis, reads the joint statement coming from Odile Renaud-Basson, President of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, EBRD, Werner Hoyer, President of the European Investment Bank, EIB, Carlo Monticelli, Governor of the Council of Europe Development Bank, CEB, Kristalina Georgieva, Managing Director of the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and David Malpass, President of the World Bank Group, WBG. The EIB has prepared an emergency Ukraine solidarity urgent response encompassing the provision of immediate financial support of 668 million euro to Ukrainian authorities and the repurposing of infrastructure project commitments to accelerate delivery of an additional 1.3 billion euros. So far, 329 million euros has been disbursed. Beyond this, EIB is fully committed to help rebuild what is being destroyed by the war by financing new critical economic and social infrastructure. In parallel, the EIB will also support the EU Eastern and Southern neighborhood, the EU enlargement region and Central Asia through an immediate response targeting in particular countries most significantly impacted by the consequences of the refugee crisis, as well as through a medium-term resilience response to mitigate social and economic impacts. Finally, EIB has developed an action plan to help alleviate the impact of the refugee crisis on refugee-hosting EU countries. The World Bank Group has already mobilized more than $925 million for Ukraine, including fast disbursing budget support to help the government provide critical services to Ukrainian people, of which $350 million has been disbursed. This financing is part of a $3 billion package of support planned for Ukraine in the coming months. The World Bank also set up a multi-donor trust fund, MDTF, and is among the most rapid, targeted and secure mechanisms to facilitate channeling grant resources from donors to Ukraine, with contributions of around $145 million thus far. The World Bank Group is also working on options to assist neighboring countries, including to support refugee populations, and will continue to provide trade finance to support the private sector. The CEB, according to its membership and special social mandate, has provided emergency grants to Ukraine's neighboring countries to cover immediate needs of refugees, including transportation and orientation. The CEB stands ready to also provide flexible, fast disbursing loans to address the significant financial needs of neighboring and other countries hosting large inflow of refugees while remaining focused on the social sector. The EBRD has approved the War in Ukraine EBRD resilience package, initially sized at €2 billion to respond to the immediate needs of the people affected by the war and, when conditions permit, support the substantial reconstruction of Ukraine. The EBRD's package comprises an immediate resilience and livelihoods program covering the areas of energy security, nuclear safety, municipality services, trade finance support, and liquidity for SMEs in Ukraine and in neighboring affected countries. Once conditions permit, the EBRD will also be prepared to take part in a reconstruction program for Ukraine to rebuild livelihoods and businesses, restore vital infrastructure, support good governance, and enable access to services. It envisages working with international partners, including the EU and the US, as well as bilateral donors and other international financial institutions. The EBRD appointed Dimitri Gvindadze, head of climate strategy and regional delivery, and replaced him with another Georgian, George Akalkatsi, as the new head of its Yerevan resident office. And this is the Checkpoints. I'm Elena Gvanjilashvili, and our whole team has worked hard to give you the local and global perspective on key business and economic tendencies. To continue the line of our headlines, the IMF also disbursed emergency assistance of $1.4 billion to Ukraine on March 9 under the Rapid Financing Instrument, RFI, to help meet urgent financing needs and mitigate the economic impact of the war. IMF staff remains closely engaged with the authorities to provide policy support as they continue to design and implement effective crisis mitigation measures. The IMF is also currently working with Moldova, that has requested an augmentation of its existing IMF-supported program. The fund stands ready to support neighboring and other countries affected by the spillovers of the war through all its instruments. The key interview this week definitely was with IMF's Kristalina Georgieva, who elaborated on how the global sanctions are affecting Russia and what could be the overall impact of growing sanctions on Russia's economy. Here is a short soundbite from the interview with Face the Nation.
We expect deep recession in Russia, and this abrupt contraction is affecting already how the Russian population is taking the hit on them. The ruble depreciated significantly. What does it mean? Real incomes have shrunk. Purchasing power of the Russian population has significantly diminished. Mm-hmm. In terms of servicing debt obligations, I can say that no longer we think of Russian default as improbable event. Russia has the money to service its debt, but cannot access it. What I'm more concerned is that there are consequences that go beyond Ukraine and Russia.
It is clear that although Russia's share in global GDP is around 2%, the spillover effects of these strict sanctions on the rest of the world is inevitable, and the West has already agreed that it is willing to take the sacrifice in order to ensure global peace and security. And Ukraine today is the example of how to defend its independence and bring the light at the end of the dark tunnel for the rest of the world as well. Here is a short analysis from the IMF's Kristalina Georgieva, again on the most vulnerable part of the world in terms of the spillover effects.
What we are mostly concerned about are the immediate neighbors of Russia and Ukraine, the Central Asian republics, the Caucasus, Moldova, because they have trade relations with both Russia and Ukraine, more than the rest of the world, and because of this outflow of people, refugee wave in Europe that is of the order of magnitude of what happened in the Second World War. Mm-hmm. So there the impact is most significant. Beyond the immediate neighbors, there are two groups of countries we are very worried. The first group are countries that have yet to recover from the COVID-induced economic crisis. For them, this shock is particularly painful. And the second group of countries are those that are more dependent on energy imports from Russia, because there the impact on consumption, but also on inflation, is going to be more prominent.
Foreign ambassadors serving in Georgia are well aware of the risks that Russia's intrusion in Ukraine holds for Georgia. That is why they take the decisions of the government of Georgia, a sovereign country, as they are. However, some of them are particularly vocal that Georgia should support and join international sanctions imposed on Russia by the West.
The European Union invites its associated partners to join its sanctions. What this means concretely in the case of Georgia, what Georgia can do and should do, is the subject of discussions that we are having with the Georgian government and I expect that these discussions will move forward and come to results in the coming days.
We were holding communication, we were talking with the leadership Georgian. I had yesterday, even today we'll have a meeting in the parliament. Definitely we were talking and we're in this consultative mode in order just, the comprehensive solutions, the sustainable solutions would be found. How we could work together for Ukraine, and how we, Lithuania, could work even more for Georgia's case to defend that case in Brussels in Euro-Atlantic organizations. We as a Lithuania would like all countries who enjoys the democracy, freedoms and the values would join the international community with the West and the EU by joining the sanctions. Definitely not easy decisions, but at the same time, this is the value-based decision. Our government has joined the sanctions, and we are pushing for even more and harsher sanctions against Russia and Ukraine. We hear and we respect the decision that is being made by any country, and there are different arguments in every country. So we do hear and we do respect the decision.
What exactly is the dependence of Georgia on Russia's economy, and what matters for Georgia more, Russian or the EU market? ICET's economist Yaroslava Babic talked to the Checkpoints. Yaroslava, thank you for being with us and taking our questions for BMG and the Checkpoints. Being Ukrainian, I know how tough this war is on you. What is the situation right now, and what could be some of the spillover effects, economic effects on Georgia and the rest of the world?
Right, Elena. This is very tough time for Ukraine, for the world, also for Georgia. Unfortunately, this war comes right as the world, as countries started emerging from COVID-19 pandemic. So unfortunately, the starting point, the macroeconomic indicators right now are worse than they were just 2 years ago before the pandemic started. So that adds to the risks that we see. So the main risks that are going to affect Georgia and the world have to do, of course, with prices. We already see energy prices have risen. I mean, they have risen in the past year due to the pandemic effects, but they're likely to rise more depending on how long the war is going to last. So then the crucial price that we are looking at here is wheat. Both Russia and Ukraine account for about a quarter of world's wheat supply, and this is a very very significant high dependency. These both countries are wheat exporters, and for Georgia in particular that can have significance. So of course Ukraine is we know that the situation is tough here, but the people are holding on. And from what I heard last polls is that 76% say the country is on the right track. And more than 60% believe in the victory that will come,
Slava Ukraini. That's the only comment that I have.
Thank you. Yes, and so given that the determination and given the world efforts to basically support Ukraine and help Ukrainian people win this war, I believe that these hopes will be realized. Now, what are the risks for Georgia?
This is the slide that shows Georgia's dependence on the Russian economy in 2021.
Let's start from exports. So we see that dependence on Russia overall is not very high. 14%. It's high, but it's not catastrophically high. Of course, we can see that EU share is a bit higher. Also, we can see that Azerbaijan is pretty high. So, but here, together with Ukraine, Russia and Ukraine exports, Georgian exports to Russia and Ukraine account for about 1/5 of the total. This is pretty significant. Yes. And more importantly, particular products are vulnerable. For example, as of last year, around 60% of Georgian wine, close to 60% of Georgian wine, goes to Russia. Around 40% of mineral waters. Around 44% of ferroalloys, which is also a significant export. As far as Ukraine, the dependence on Ukraine is mostly on fertilizers. Around 38% of fertilizers are exported to Ukraine. Of course, Georgia would have to find other markets and to lessen its dependency on the Russian market.
Yes,
in
there comes my question. What should the private sector do in these circumstances? Because ISET, together with many other think tanks, has been warning the private sector that such a dependency, let's say not high dependence, but growing dependency on Russian market would result something like this. Of course, we could not have envisaged neither pandemic nor almost a third world war in 21st century, the century which should have been a century of diplomacy rather than armed war. But yes, we still saw this growing dependency on Russian market. What should be Georgian private sector's stance? Should it join other businesses that say no to the Russian market, or what is the way out there?
Right now, as far as sanctions are concerned, the Georgian companies don't have to make a choice, really, because nobody is banning exports of wine or other products to Russia, even ferroalloys. What is banned, I think, are strategic exports, which Georgia doesn't trade with Russia. So there are no formal bans that Georgia would have to choose to join or not.
Yes, but there is this context of 400 global business players, for example, McDonald's, Microsoft, leaving Russian, it is, the picture, the overall picture is much bigger than what we are now.
Right. So definitely, doing business, increasing business with Russia or somehow taking advantage of the situation would be a devastating reputational effect for Georgian businesses. But I don't see that Georgian businesses would be doing that, because the level of support inside Georgia,
we see these indicators,
is very high, right? But there will be other difficulties for them to trade. Russian market may not be formally closed, but because of the SWIFT related sanctions, the payments will be restricted, will be difficult to make. In case of Iran, when Iran was banned from SWIFT, 1/3 of its trade disappeared. So essentially, it doesn't make the entire trade disappear, but it makes it more difficult.
So there will be no pragmatic business logic in working with Russian markets.
Exactly, right. Plus the fact that ruble has sunk in value, and this makes Russia less likely to afford even products even in Georgia. So they have to conserve somehow their foreign exchange, and there might be some ruble transactions, but this is again a question. So I think we would see a significant decline in exports to Russia, and reorientation to the
decline
European.
In this number, right?
In this number, right. So definitely wine is one of the products that have been sanctioned by Russia in the past. So we have
Yes.
a foothold into the European
That's
market.
why we have this market basically here, because that was in during Russia's embargo in 2006. Georgian wine explored Chinese market. And
That's right, that's right. So China, EU, Ukraine were all markets where Georgian wine branched out, and that in the long run proved to be a positive thing for the business. So I think this time there will be also this tendency to reorient itself and become more competitive on these markets.
yes, what about imports and FDI?
And so
and
let me talk a little bit. Yeah, remittances is an interesting actually figure. You see that we depend less on Russia now than, for example, on EU, and slightly more than USA. So what is going on here? If we compare with 2008, the share of remittances coming to Georgia from Russia was around 63%. So more than half, more than 60%, we were dependent on people working in Russia and sending money here. Now this dependency is much less. It's half of what it was in 2015. So this dependency has been decreasing, and I think it will decline even more. And this is a good thing for Georgia.
Definitely.
Of course, in the short run, that means that some people will not be able to send money from the places where they work.
But it means much
eventually-
less for the overall economy.
That's right.
Yes,
that's right.
than
So
we could
overall,
have
the economy,
expected.
the economy of Georgia will not be as affected as it would have been in the past. So FDI, you can see, foreign direct investment is not that big.
This is Achilles heel for Georgia's economy, unfortunately, for quite a number of years.
That's
now.
right. So in imports, this is an interesting figure, because you can see 10% here, which is quite low. And 4% in Ukraine, right? But if we go to the next slide, for example, we could see that the dependence
Go to the
on certain.
sorry.
That's
That's not right. This is here. Yes, that's the slide.
So if we go to the next slide, we can see that the dependence on both Ukraine and Russia are high in particular products. So cereals like buckwheat and wheat and other grains, 87% comes from the Russian market. We can see that as far as edible oil, the oil, cooking oil, 62% comes from Russia. Energy products, we are dependent on electricity, gas, diesel, around 20%. It fluctuates based on the season, but still, for now, the dependence is not as high.
Yeah, this slide to me actually says that where Georgia managed to have diversification, and that's energy, is less problematic now.
That's
for
right.
Georgia,
The energy is very
if
encouraging.
these were high, yes.
If Europe could boast that number,
Exactly,
they would be
exactly.
very, very happy.
All of us would be in a better position, actually.
That's right. But still, the energy prices have climbed up, and if they increase, let's say 20% more to $120 a barrel, $130 a barrel, we could see a rise in inflation in Georgia as well. So that, based on the past experience, it could add 2-3 percentage points to inflation. So there is still going to be a significant spillover effects, economic spillover effects, but the dependence is not as high now as it was. So as far as tourism is concerned.
Yes, and here, just sorry for
yeah.
interrupting, but here I don't see sugar, and I had to mention that. I had to mention that in these circumstances, and our viewers understand exactly what I mean under that. But if we add up the numbers here, share of Russia and share of Ukraine, we definitely see that, for example, flour products. Yes,
yeah.
it's
very high. Yeah,
problem,
so
yes,
around
and
60%. Of course, we could find other markets, but that would mean buying at a higher price.
Yes, exactly. Of course. Deficit of products in 21st century is
it started actually before the pandemic. Before the pandemic and during the pandemic, this tendency for food price increase became stronger, and we already saw a 30% increase in the food prices around the world. In Georgia, food prices increased by 17% just last year. So this is a significant share. And that means that people who are most vulnerable, who are poor, will suffer most. Because where do they get the calories? Most of the calories is from bread. And this is why there is another...
And probably SME sector also, because they have less leverage to diversify really in a short period of time.
Exactly. So SMEs, businesses that are vulnerable to these small businesses and businesses that have established ties, and would be difficult for them to reorient themselves.
And we should remember that these are the segments that have already been hit very strongly by the pandemic as well.
That's right. So the support for SMEs, the support for vulnerable groups should increase in Georgia. The Georgian government should keep an eye on the financial sector, which is the lifeblood of the economy. Right now, it showed to be quite resilient and strong in the face of the pandemic.
Do you think there is room for cutting some taxes, because that's what the business is asking for right now? That's VAT tax and that's the revenue tax.
That would mean the increase in government deficit. That would mean definitely it's not an easy solution, but it could be done. Along with other measures. So definitely borrowing is right now more difficult, but working with multinational partners, with international development organizations, could help Georgia overcome.
Sorry again for interrupting. We diverted from tourism. You mentioned tourism. What's going on here?
Yeah, so tourism is a very important part of Georgian economy, not just for the balance of payments overall, but because it is a source of cash for most for people who are otherwise are not employed, for informal employment. And we can see that Russia does have a significant share in tourism spending. So this comes from the GNTA survey of visitors. Although the Russian overall share in tourism visitors is not that high, it's around 12%. If we consider the figures, how much Russian tourists spend in Georgia, they spend less, significantly less than, let's say, European tourists. This particular share of Eastern Europe, and especially now when the world is emerging from the pandemic, when people are hungry for a bit of normalcy and travel and experience. So I think this is a good time for Georgia to welcome this high-paying tourists from Europe. Of course, that will be more difficult than hosting Russian tourism, because their expectations for quality in Europe are higher, and expectations from the infrastructure, from services are higher. So Russian market was quite a bit easier for Georgia, but still it's worth, just like with wine back in 2006, just it's
motivation for more
diversification.
diversification.
That's right. That's right.
Yes. So this picture actually tells me that it's a big deal. I mean, Russia's default, all the problems, of course, will have a spillover effect, but it's not as a big deal as some say.
I think there are significant risks, so it depends on how the war progresses and how soon it will end, what will be the scenarios. But I do think, my personal opinion is that COVID pandemic was a much bigger crisis for Georgia, and Georgia withstood, Georgian economy overcame this. Combination of fiscal policies, combination of financial sector policy support. So this crisis will, in my opinion, have less of an impact than the COVID.
Given the fact that there won't be another war in Georgia, and
that's right. Yeah, there are significant geopolitical risks,
exactly.
And if the situation is frozen somehow or unresolved, then it's possible that investors, foreign investors, might think it's too risky to put their money in Georgia.
Yeah, that's the main risk that involves investor sentiments and investor expectations, definitely, which we thought would be like the first thing to work on for the fast recovery after pandemic.
Yes. And I think the fact that Georgia is signaling European aspirations is a strong reputational factor, but also a signal for European investors, American investors. This is the country that that we can
here
rely
I
on.
come to my closing question, and thank you for your time again. And I think that's very logical to ask that in the context that you have just mentioned. What should be Georgia's stance in joining the international sanctions, and what would that mean for Georgia? Because some of the big businesses that you have mentioned, which are driving our exports, there we see Russian investments, right? So what does it mean for Georgia to be part of the international sanctions, and how that is related to the reputation that you just mentioned?
I think the businesses themselves, they are very sensitive to these reputational effects, and just like Europe is dependent on gas from Russia, Georgian businesses are also dependent on some critical exports. So the right message could be that we are going to have a plan for how to exit the Russian market if this war continues in this way. And
I know that you don't want to mention that, but I will say that, and not what we hear from the government, that this is the final decision and we won't be thinking about joining the sanctions.
I think that's not a good thing to say, because that means that it's a signal. It's basically a signal that taking sides, which Georgia should be very careful about. Georgia has European aspirations. You saw from all of these numbers here that we are more dependent on the EU than we are dependent on Russia. So which market would be worse to lose for us? The European market or the Russian market?
Foreign ambassadors serving in Georgia are ready to support Georgia's Euro-Atlantic aspirations and its economic diversification towards the EU markets, especially during these tough times for the world.
We do not wish to fund more Russia's aggression against the Ukraine, against the free world and independent and sovereign countries and their people. So all the countries right now, this is kind of wake-up call, additional wake-up call, just to stop importing and sponsoring Russia's regime. Also the Belarusian regime. Let me just remind that Belarus also is opening their territory, their soil for the Russia's aggression against Ukraine. So definitely the diversification, rebranding and rethinking of the foreign trade trends, definitely it will be an issue. And as soon as it will start, it will be much better. I can bring my Lithuanian government approach. So if any investment from the eastern countries are coming, there is special agency that is reviewing, screening the investments, and only that agency is saying yes, the investments can be done. Accordingly, we do not have any Russian, Belarusian investment in the strategic infrastructure. Would be energy, would be transport, would be telecommunication or banking system. So this is one. And the second, our government is saying to our business that these markets are not safe, are not secure markets. Of course, for businessmen and for business people to assume responsibility, but the government stance is very much clear.
European Union, we took 12, 14 years to join, and it's a very important thing to join the European Union. But in my experience and opinion, the way to joining, so the preparation, is just as important, because a lot of the priorities and criteria that are to be met are important for the country itself. So Hungary has always supported Georgia's aspirations. We still support it. We support it in the future. We hope it happens sooner than later. But do believe me that preparation is just as important, and that can be done every day. Hungary is ready to partner Georgia, especially in these hard times, to try and see where we can help with finding new import and export opportunities. So all the goods we have for sale are there for Georgia to use, and we're very happy to receive Georgian products that meet our requirements. We discussed that what we need mostly is peace to trade, because trade will bring peace and understanding that is where prosperity comes from. But in these hard times, in the meantime, we have to see how we can help each other. And as I said a little jokingly, but quite seriously, we have a great opportunity to drink more Georgian wine in Europe. So we're ready to help you with that.
Well, the present war we are faced with is a test of strength, not only on the military battlefield, but also a test of strength in terms of the economic resilience of societies, of economies. At this round table convened by the EU-Georgia Business Chamber, we saw that Georgian businesses are very aware of the situation. They know about the risks and burdens that are going to come, and they are very actively looking for ways how to mitigate the effects and how to actually strengthen the Georgian economy in this process. One part of it is finding better access to the market of the European Union to export more Georgian products to Europe. This is the time to step up efforts to increase the business and economic ties between Georgia and Europe, and both sides, Georgia and the European Union, including my country, Germany, will make great efforts to move this forward. Many Georgian businesses are already trading with the European Union. In some fields it works very nicely. We have seen that in 2006, when Russia imposed an embargo on Georgian wines, the wine export to the EU really started, and a wine laboratory was established which made this possible. This model has to be repeated in other fields as well.
Diversification on the EU market is not an easy task, and it needs modern skills that match modern development of the technological age. I'm pleased to tell you that USAID and the Georgian business leaders are working together to identify and build the skills of the workforce. By matching the skills demanded by businesses with workforce training, employees and businesses both win with higher value jobs and more productive, competitive businesses. This week, USAID launched the Business Leaders Council as part of its industry-led skills program. By working hand in hand with Georgia's private sector, USAID will ensure the private sector plays a leading role in steering the program so that it generates innovative solutions inspired by Georgia's private enterprises from growing economic sectors. And the Business Media Georgia Group will take an active part in all of this. Maria Madamia attended the event, and now she will tell us more.
The Council of Business Leaders has been officially opened in Georgia. After several hours of discussion, business leaders from the priority sectors of the country's economy attended and discussed the critical needs of the sector and the course of business development. The Business Leaders Council itself was established in partnership with the USAID's new industry-led skills development program in partnership with the PMCG and will inevitably become the business voice in the development of innovative skills development programs.
This event today joins together it's really a who's who of Georgia's private sector business leaders, some of the leaders of Georgia's biggest companies, as well as the biggest business associations, which our program has joined together to help guide us and to help bridge or close the gap between the skills and the qualifications that Georgia's young people have as they look for work, and the needs and the requirements that Georgia's private sector leaders have for their companies in terms of jobs.
It is noteworthy that the representatives of the private sector at the event spoke about the importance of private sector involvement in the development of skills needed for employment, which will further help job seekers in employment in the growing sectors of the economy. Often young people don't have information about promising or high-paid professions, therefore there is a big gap between the supply and demand of the labor market and specific professions.
This initiative also considers to gather business leaders to discuss, because the professional development is the most important issue for businesses in Georgia. The surveys that we usually regularly do with the Business Association of Georgia shows that around 92% of businesses struggle because of the lack of relevant workforce, which means that this is a really very huge number of the problems.
On the one hand, businesses are worried that they are not able to find qualified staff. On the other hand, young people say that there is a shortage of jobs in the market. The problem is actually on both sides. People find it hard to see that the choice is much wider than just law or economic majors. Therefore, the cooperation is aimed at developing the country's economy and resolving the imbalance that actually exists in the Georgian labor market. In addition, Council of Business Leaders also focused on the Russian-Ukraine conflict and its impact on Georgia.
The main problem is that unfortunately we have a post-COVID period, and during the post-COVID we were facing a lot of problems regarding utilization of medical services. Another problem was the impact of inflation on the service provision issues, that the development of the insurance business had unfortunately not very good progress. So that the claim reimbursement, the financial statements in this period unfortunately was not predicted as a good matter.
So the Business Leaders Council, held for the first time this week, will continue in the future to help the private sector identify obstacles to skill development. And so the first important steps have already been taken.
A very interesting initiative indeed. I will now give you a comprehensive follow-up on USAID and Georgian business, some joint efforts with Georgi Sakatse's interview, which was recorded in Forbes studio.
Gentlemen, thank you so much for visiting Forbes office.
Thank you for
inviting.
Glad
to have you here. Saba, let me start with you. We're talking about still newly established new program coming from USAID, which is industry-led skills development program. Can you a bit evaluate more about the purpose of this program itself?
Yes, with pleasure. So, thank you for inviting once again.
Good to have you here.
Purpose of our program is to help development of the skills sector and vocational training sector in Georgia. We simply want, and our objective is to have supply at the labor market meeting demand at the labor market.
Mm-hmm.
And as far as demand is created by employers, by private sector, our priority is to have and to support and have private sector engaged in skills development actively and sustainably. So this is objective of our program, and we have as a main instrument, we have one of the main instruments. We have grants fund, which is 13 million US dollars.
Yeah.
At the same time, we have technical assistance available as well for our beneficiaries of our program. We have 3 components, and under these 3 components, we have different grant schemes. So component 1 is aimed at facilitating engagement of private sector, because we realize that skills development is not their core business for employers. This is something that is coming from the need. And we, with our support and our, let's say, funds, we are trying to reduce the risk which is connected to the engagement in the new field. Yeah. And this is the aim of the component 1. And here we have relatively small grants with maximum amount per project, per grant project, $30,000 US dollars, with contribution requirement from the grantee, which is 20%, including cash and in kind. And under component 2, we are already talking about development, improvement if there is a need, and implementation of training programs. And we have 2 subcomponents, one dealing with short-term training courses, which meaning less duration, less than 6 months, and long-term, more than 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah. And we have, let's say, a grant scheme different from the component 1, with maximum amount for first subcomponent $300,000 US dollars per project, and for the long-term programs, 1.5 million US dollars per project from our side is our investment, and we require one-to-one contribution, again including cash and in kind. And under component 3, in order to help inclusiveness and access of rural population and regional population to high-quality skills development opportunities, we support replication of existing training programs in regions. And under region, we mean any location on the territory of Georgia except of 5 self-governing cities. At the same and the grant scheme is the following.
And this exemption is due to the special, elected city mayors, or why it's?
No, actually, we don't have any geographical limitation or sector limitation as a project.
As a project.
But specifically for component 3, in order to help.
Just for this component.
Yeah, just for this component.
So, yeah,
yes,
okay,
right.
go on. Yeah.
And for component 3, when we are talking about replication of existing training programs in rural area, maximum amount per grant project is $500,000 US dollars from our side, and contribution is the same like for component 2, one-to-one, including cash and in kind.
In kind.
In general, as far as it's about economic development, so the main part of the economic development is business development, private sector development, right? And so talking to our businesses, and probably Goga will add more because they have huge experience in this field. Everybody is talking about lack of professional skills.
Yeah. Thank you for this alla verdi, as we say in Georgia. Taking to this divert. Basically, Goga, at the same time, I had a privilege to attend the establishment, launching, let me say so, of the new established Business Council, where you present PMCG. Firstly, tell me a bit more about the partnership with the program, I mean PMCG and the program itself, and then some more questions will come.
Great, thank you for inviting me. In this case, PMCG supports the program in establishment and functioning of the Business Leaders Council. The program had a great idea to establish this consulting council where business leaders can contribute to the successful implementation of the program by recommending, participating in the program implementation in a way that they are observing, evaluating the program implementation, getting feedback from the program management team, and at the same time are bringing voice of the business into the program implementation. I mean that it was great that USAID and the group, which is SAPRA representing, decided to have a constant communication with businesses in the process of designing the program and implementing the program. And PMCG plays a role of a facilitator in the process and supporting the program in the process of bringing together business leaders, getting their voice into the program implementation and addressing their concerns in a way that we will in total in this year conduct 4 meetings, and between the meetings we want to dig deeper into the questions, concerns, recommendations which were highlighted during the meetings, and then having different instruments in use. I mean, we want to invite different guest speakers, mainly from the state authorities, and also make this discussion between state authorities responsible for the education, business actors and educational institutions make the program work better. Because we and our colleagues saw this challenge that the business works differently, private sector works differently, and educational institutions are also unique entity. And so it's very important to help them to make their collaboration more efficient, and this council as a unit or as an institution should support to make this collaboration more efficient.
While mentioning digging in various directions, I think you already succeed in one of them while representing major trends of the labor market. What are the key findings due to the presentation you did through the first meeting of the Business Council?
So the main thing we're observing at the moment in Georgia is that after COVID crisis, I hope I'm right saying after crisis, because we are still in the crisis, but because
we just forgot.
We forgot that we had COVID crisis. We observe the situation, Georgi, that there are more people willing to work. The labor force is growing. There are more vacancies. There are more job opportunities. There are more businesses who want to hire. And not that we only think so. We have evaluated data from JobsG, main website for vacancies. We are conducting business surveys where we see, together with Business Association of Georgia, that whether businesses are willing to hire or not. And at the same time, we are using data from Georgian Statistics Office about the labor force participation rates, and we see there that actually everything suggests that the employment rate should decrease. But surprisingly, the opposite is happening. The unemployment rate is increasing. And one of the main reasons behind this is, in our opinion, the so-called skills mismatch. And that the people for whom businesses are looking for are not there. Or people with
They do exist or they are not?
They are, okay, people with specific skills businesses are looking for are not there. And
clear, yeah.
What I want to highlight is that surveying businesses, we observe that from businesses, as a source, I will use the latest BAG survey, BAG Index survey. We see that from businesses who are saying that they have difficulties to make their business, more than 40% are saying that they lack skilled specialists or specialists. And what is very important to highlight here is that not only that they lack in all sectors, the results are almost same. And talking with businesses, we see that surprisingly, for instance, trade sector faces huge difficulties, not only to find people with skills, but to find people where not so high skills are required. Why? Because people from trade sector were moved because of various reasons, and we can discuss this further when if necessary, but they are leaving the sector, and there is obvious need for low-skilled people in service sector, in trade sector, and somehow educational sector and businesses by themselves have to address it. And I'm happy that within this program, as Saba already highlighted in detail, there are a lot of opportunities for every business representative companies to use this vehicle to address those challenges.
Saba, besides we are just in the beginning, I'm not talking about especially platform as a business leaders council. Now, program itself, it's just few months, it's been launched, and the action plan has been set up and things like that. That's a question both for you. Can we sort of evaluate just from the very beginning in 2022 in this another difficult year? Let me say so. Yeah. What should be the results of these joint efforts through this program, where you will definitely say that this was one of the most successful programs where all stakeholders were not just engaged, but all the KPIs or whatever aims and whatever plans were set up, they were all met successfully?
Of course, it's important for the program to meet all the all the targets set by indicators, and so we will be meeting these targets, and we have, let's say, some particular targets in terms of trained people, in terms of employment, and so on and so forth. But what I want to underline, and what could be, let's say, one of the important results of this program, it will be success stories about private sector engagement in skills development field, which can be replicated in future. Successful engagement and sustainable engagement, because satisfied businesses are the best promoters of this engagement, and the success stories are the best promotion tools.
Can't agree more. I got you.
So, And at the same way, another result that I would like to see is improved partnership between private sector and training providers, which is a challenge right now at this stage, and it requires quite significant, let's say, efforts to improve. But I hope that the program will make its contribution into this process, because it's very important. Right now, let's say, training providers, and especially colleges and businesses, they speak different language.
Yeah.
So,
but they have common understanding, I hope.
Which is a kind of barrier in to have successful partnership, which is very important, because it will be helping each other.
Yeah, thank you. Goga, please go ahead.
Georgi, I like and I'm happy that in Georgia finally our international partners, but also some of the state agencies and not maybe majority of people living in Georgia, but big number of people understood that business sector is the sector which can move forward the country. And this is very important to understand, and this is very important to highlight everywhere. And why is for USAID, in my understanding, this program so important? Because there is a clear understanding that only strong business sector can make Georgia wealthier. And at the same time, I'm very happy to see that in educational sector there are certain changes. For instance, the establishment of vocational skills agency, which giving businesses the opportunity to contributing, or not only contribute, to leading the process in skills development. Because now the running changes are focused on increasing the role of business sector and business associations in developing new programs and supporting new kind of educational structures and educational programs. And I think that it's a perfect timing for this program now to, on the one hand, to make clear businesses that it's your time now. There's no more time of complaining and saying that this university is...
Time to act?
Time to act. And at the same time, any financial incentive to act helps here a lot. And this program offers such kind of incentives, because for, let's say, every dollar you invest, you get $1 from the program additionally. And for me, and I agree with Saba, because I was intended to say the same, we need best practices, we need successful cases where concrete businesses can showcase that it's possible to collaborate with training providers. It's possible to act as the skilled developers for their interest and, of course, for the interest of the whole economy. Because nobody can guarantee now that if I educate you, you will stay forever in my company and you will move forward. And so I think that successful cases, I agree with Saba totally, and increased responsibility on the side of the business in this field of development of Georgia. This is for me very important.
Thank you so much for visiting us. It's just the beginning. I hope that you will join me in some few more conversations later on. Good luck to the Business Council, good luck to the program itself, And then all the best coming from Saba Sarashvili and Georgi Khistovanis. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Georgi, for more details. And let me close the program with the Georgian showbiz supporting Ukraine and also a very inspirational statement of support coming from the legendary world musician Stevie Wonder. I will say goodbye for now till next Sunday, and with the hope that you will keep checking us out on BM.G and Farbs.G before we meet again. You can even sing along and definitely stand united for Ukraine.
Can we survive if Ukraine does not? That is a question that all of us should ask. Are we surprised that the forces of evil are alive and aggressive in today's world? I'm not surprised, and you shouldn't be either. I write and sing about it because I can feel it. You should know about it because you can see. Unless you have a blind eye to it and don't want to do anything about it, you can see it. Those of us who know hate recognize the commonality of inhumanity. It is good versus evil, right versus wrong, tyranny over liberty. This is not just a Ukrainian war. Today, Ukraine is in the battle for the soul of the world.
Just call my name. If you ever feel down or feel afraid, 'cause nothing is stronger than men who stand as one for a long time.
All the things that passed, million times the troubles seem to be
easy, and days felt so bright with you.
I remember you always been my family member.
That's the time when we need to stand together. I made this song for you. Hope it reaches and puts a little bit
smile on you
and fills your mind with hope, because you're not alone. We're together
in this love.
We stand forever.
Peace is what we need. Everyone knows the truth, no matter which side you pick. You might realize
you're not alone. We're together in this love. We stand forever.
One thing to remember, and magic words we need. Slava Ukraini.
The Checkpoint is presented by GM Pharma, the first international multinational pharmaceutical company in Georgia. GM Pharma, to serve those who need it most.